little bit later on, Colm Keane and Una Hagan are coming in talking about their new book, Animal Crackers, Irish Pet Stories. Some funny things in there. In the meantime, Social Democrats Deputy Stephen Donnelly is here. Where were you and Robbie Brady headed in that goal?
Morning, Declan. I terrified two of my kids. One of them had fallen asleep on my lap. And the other one was kind of wrapped around my arm. And I had been using probably some fairly unparliamentary language when about a minute and a half earlier we'd missed absolute sitter. So when Brady scored, my two kids jumped off the couch. But what a night. Amazing.
Indeed. Let's hope it continues.
Yeah.
But there you go. Stephen, just a couple of things. It's obviously a big day today for the United Kingdom, as about 45 million people are entitled to vote, remain or leave the European Union. What's your view?
It's a big day for us, actually. This matters. It matters a great deal. There's different polls saying different things, but it could go either way. You know what happened with the British general election. It was called on a knife edge, and in the end the Tories romped home. So we really don't know. It's pretty high stakes stuff, I think, for Britain. I lived and worked in the UK for about a decade, so and may end up back there, who knows. And certainly there's a lot of people from Wicklow who are over living there, and it matters for all of that. The numbers are scary enough. So they've done all sorts of modelling that shows if Britain's GDP falls by 1%, ours falls by about a fifth of that, because they're our biggest trading partner. Noonan describes them as our biggest customer, which I guess they are, but obviously they're much more than that. You know, the cultural links, the social links, the economic links, the business links. As an example, I was with a Wicklow company earlier on in the week who are doing really well, really positive growth story, construction industry stuff. They've grown in Ireland, and now they're in the UK. They've got about 3 or 4 depots in the UK, and if they can take a tiny, tiny fraction of that market, they're going to grow by a tenfold just in the next few years. So it's so important. The business is just in Wicklow. The other potential problem is if they leave, chances are the value of sterling will go down, because they're isolated, they're not part of the common trading bloc. Sterling going down is bad for us, obviously. It hurts our exports.
It's rallying at the moment. It's gone up. I mean, it touched in what I think it might have been March or April, 80 cent. It's down now to 76.
Yeah, and if they leave, it'll go further. And what that means is, for our companies in Wicklow selling into the UK, which is exactly what this company is doing, it basically, the weaker sterling gets, the stuff we're selling to them becomes more expensive for them. Right, so it's one of the reasons the trade has worked out quite well, is because, sterling was very strong, the US dollar was very strong, and remains
more of a bang for their pound.
Right.
Yeah.
So sterling going down is a problem for us. So I hope they stay, I really do. If they leave, we might be able to turn it to our advantage, because suddenly you have a narrative. You've got all of these companies coming from China, from the US, from Latin America, from wherever. And now we can say, well, look, there's only now one English-speaking country in the Eurozone, and that's us. So yeah, you can go to London, or you can go to Birmingham, or you can go to Coventry, but really they're not in the Eurozone. They're not in the Euro area anymore. They're not in the EU anymore, and you should come over here. A lot of the financial services will move from London. There'll be a lot more jobs in financial services.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I've spoken to people in financial services working in London, and they've said, there's quite a bit of business would come across. Because
that's a hell of a lot of disruption. They'll find some way around it. Money talks,
Well, that's kind of the point. Money does talk. So if you're moving billions or tens of billions across, a desk, a team in London, and suddenly you're outside the EU, well, you might say, well, look, guys, we need sort of 10, 15 people in
but
the
Wall
EU.
Street hasn't moved.
No, that's true. But remember, what's going on in London is within the EU, so it makes a lot of sense for the big banks there to say, look, we don't have an English-speaking operation in the EU anymore. The only English-speaking operation in the EU is now Ireland, so let's move 5, 10, 15 of our people there, and then so you can potentially grow it. We'd have to put all sorts of bilateral agreements in place, free movement of people, labour, trade, all that stuff. We need to keep it going.
Would we join Schengen? if that exists, of course, but it's in doubt even at the moment.
I don't think so. No, I don't.
We'd still have to have this common travel with the UK.
Oh, we would, yeah, absolutely.
Well, my daughter works in London now. Well, she's not going to be asked for a visa or something, is she?
Well, who knows? Who knows?
But it's been, even when there was no EU, Ireland and our ERA and the UK were just, interchangeable.
Fine. Yeah, so that bilateral agreement is in place. But you see, the danger now is, I don't see any situation in which Irish people would need a visa to go to the UK or vice versa, because we'll just put a bilateral agreement in place. The danger is it just becomes a hassle. So we now become seen as an easy port of entry for non-EU migrants to get into the UK. So suddenly you have to put much more controls. Now, we may be able to go through the borders, but everyone will probably be stopped at the border. It'll become, this phrase, a hard border, where you've actually got to put gates. I've
heard people say that Britain might put up the barriers to entry in Liverpool and Larne.
Well, they
and
could,
Wales.
Yeah.
That 450 miles of border along the Irish border is just too hard to police. So it's much better to do it.
Well, they've done it before on the Irish. Yeah, sure, but they've done it before.
Prevention Terrorism Act back in the 70s meant that was a barrier between Northern Ireland and Great Britain.
Yeah. Sure, but there was also, they have policed and enforced, obviously, and sadly, a border between the north and the south for many years. So could they put that back in place? Yeah, they could. So look, the hope is they will remain. If they leave, it'll hurt us. There are opportunities for us if they do leave. I think we will lose socially. We might gain economically. We might lose economically, but they are our closest neighbour. We do seem to have more or less got over our spat, our long-standing fight with them. I spent 10 years living and working in the UK. I've an awful lot of time for it, and we benefit from each other. I do think, though, it is worth. There are real lessons to be learned for Europe and for Ireland in Europe, because you have to say, well, why are they doing this? If the economic argument is strong, like trade is good, trade should make people wealthier, it should make countries wealthier, it should improve everybody's lot. And so it's very interesting to say, well then why are they looking to do this? And partly the European institutions have become largely unaccountable.
They're dreadful.
I'll give you a very quick anecdote. But when I was
kicking everybody, I mean, we got kicked during the recession.
We did, and it was outrageous what happened. When I was studying in Boston, Bertie Ahern came over. He was given remember he did his speech to the joint houses of Congress and the Senate. Well, he did another one in Boston. And I asked him, or someone else asked him, at the time, do you remember the EU constitution had come in and one or two countries had voted against it? And then they took it off the table and they came back and they said, well, now it's a treaty and you don't have to vote on it anymore. That was put to him. I think it was me. I can't quite remember. I think I said, surely that is undemocratic. And he basically said, look, to be honest, we changed the name on the document. It wasn't going the way we wanted it to go. We changed the name on the document and therefore people no longer needed a vote. And the British, and I think in particular the English, they have a real problem with that. They're a rules-based society. We're not so good on the rules. We're greyer on the rules. But the English are kind of fastidious on the rules. And they don't like that kind of stuff. And they don't like the unaccountability in Europe. And if you talk to people close to David Cameron, they will talk about, going to these big conferences where people are getting paid all sorts of expenses in these very fancy places where nothing's really happening. And they don't like that. And they don't like being told what to do. So there are real lessons for all of us in terms of Europe.
Okay, I just want to ask you one more question on this. Now, I'll take a break and come back with the fiscal space, which have arrived in the media again. Should we be building business parks along Donegal, Monaghan, Cavan and Louth and absorbing all businesses, and here is your way?
I don't know. We should certainly be building them in Wicklow. We need them in places like Arklow, places like Blessington, Greystones. We've been pushing for one for quite some time. In fact, I was talking to the Minister about the IDA's building programme just yesterday. So I don't know is the answer.
Encourage from Scotland,
areas.
From Northern Ireland, from England. Here's your gateway to Europe.
Yeah, but why not? But let's make sure we get
very unfriendly sounding.
Let's make sure we get them in Wicklow as
well. Exactly. I've given up on Wicklow. Sorry about that.
Well, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Listen, we'll come back with Stephen Donnelly in just a second. Our number is 087 77 11 103.
The Morning Show on East Coast FM.
7 nights a week.
East Coast FM.
Stephen Donnelly is here, independent. He used to be, but he's Social Democrats now, and we voted him as a Social Democrat. How's the old party going? Is it more members coming in, or
yeah,
what?
there's more members coming in. It's a lot of work, to be honest, and it's not moving as fast as I'd like it to move. And to be perfectly honest, the polls are not good. We're very small and new, and kind of trying to hire staff and trying to figure out how to become a party. We've got a small amount of kind of funding now after the election, so it's a lot of work. It's not going actually as well as I'd hoped it would, to be perfectly honest. There's a huge opportunity. I really think the need is there for a fresh, socially liberal, pro-business, but very much on the centre left, on the social issues, big on equality, big on services. I think the need is absolutely there for that. I hope we can be it. But it's hard. We're tiny, and we're competing.
We're all a bit worn out with the election and how long it took to form a government. So maybe from your own point of view, we might all come back again when there's more focus.
I hope so. You know, I hope so. I believe the need is there, but the reality is we're a tiny little organisation competing with really huge organisations with massive amounts of money, and that's a tough fight.
Well, it's on the subject of that because you stood for better use of the money that could be generated by a successful economy. And we're back talking about this, loads of money, maybe it's 11 billion, I don't know, and there's the rainy day fund and all that. So I just wanted to get your views of how you see a sensible way of spending the money that we could be generating over the next few years or so.
Yeah, not like this is the short answer. What the Summer Economic Statement shows is, do you remember during the election, the government came out and said there's 12 billion available, and everyone thought, that's a lot of money. And then the IFAC, the Fiscal Advisory Council, came out and said, well, there's not that much, actually, when you take into account that the population is growing and getting older, and when you take into account inflation, it's not that at all. It falls to about 3, if from memory. And then they say, the government said, and we're going to wipe out USC, which is 5. So actually you ended up, with money to do new things, you actually ended up at less than 0. And the problem with the Summer Economic Statement is it's doing the same thing. It's double counting money. It's announcing 11 billion as if this is a new 11 billion that we weren't talking about last year. It's the same 11 billion. When you look at the amounts that the things are tipping up by, they're actually fairly modest. And what it doesn't do, what it needs to do and it doesn't do, is say, look, if we did nothing, here's what would happen. Here's the amount of money we need to spend just to stand still, right? A growing population, aging population, new teachers, new nurses, new doctors, keeping the roads, upgrading the road, all that stuff. Just keeping things where they're at. This is how much of the 11 billion we'd have to spend, and this is what's left. That's the conversation we have to have, and we don't know. So actually, it's a very I've gone through it in some detail, and I'm going to ring the Department of Finance today and say, can you walk me through this, because I don't get where all these numbers are coming from. So my first comment is, don't be fooled by the big numbers. The real numbers are actually much smaller, and they're kind of been hidden, just like they were during the election, and the government got called out on it. You talk about the need for the Social Democrats. I mean, in fairness, we were the party that stood up and said these numbers are nonsense, and they were nonsense. Now, given that, the other disappointing thing that it's doing is it's looking to erode the tax base yet again. Now, anyone listening to this and say, less taxes is good. I'm struggling to pay childcare. I'm struggling to pay for petrol for the car. I'm struggling to pay for food. The supermarket shop at the end of the week. I'm struggling to pay the electricity bill. My motor insurance has gone up 80% in the last year. My healthcare has just gone up. We need more money in our pockets just to stand still, right? Because all the costs are going up. And so the way you got to do it is say, look, we need the taxes. All those schools in Wicklow, those teachers, the guards, the roads, the broadband that needs to come in, the business parks we need to establish, all of that stuff That's from taxes. So we need that. We need to be investing. We need to be upgrading the N11.
And we get it from where?
Upgrading the N81. Well, we get it from taxes. So the point is,
which taxes?
Well, from all of them. But the point is, don't erode the taxes.
So you want to hold on to the USC?
Yes, you got to leave the USC where it is
for everybody.
Yes, and then what you got to say is, look, we do need more money in our pockets. So what do is you systematically go after the cost of living. You go after childcare. You go after motor insurance, healthcare, transport, energy costs. You bring all of these costs down, which means that people can get on with their lives. It's too expensive. Wicklow is too expensive. Rent is too expensive. Mortgages are too expensive. The rest of the country is too expensive. So what the government is doing, just coming back from all the detail, the big direction that they're taking is they're saying taxes are bad. You know, if you reduce taxes, people will work. There's no evidence to back that up at all. It's a completely failed ideology. That's what they're doing. Now, what I'm saying and what the Social Democrats are saying is, no, hang on. That's public money. Now, we need to spend it properly, but we do need it to invest in hospice, in respite, in the hospitals, in the schools and so forth. Let's go after the cost of living, and there's nothing in the economic statement on that. So I think the broad direction they're taking, which is just make us an even lower tax economy, which actually is going to make everything more expensive, is absolutely the wrong way to go.
All right, I've got to interrupt you because we're running out of time, but I want to ask you this quick question, and if you could answer it briefly for me, please. Carol and Arklow, what are the government going to do about repossessions of family homes? They're
not going to do enough. So what needs to happen is there needs to be a moratorium on repossessions right now. What got negotiated into the programme for government was some really useful things on mortgages, like having a one-stop shop for people in arrears, like having mandated, actually a lot of the stuff you and I have talked about over the last 5 years. There were people I've been working with were very involved in the negotiations, and in fairness to the Independent Alliance, it was that grouping who went in, pushed all of this stuff. So the hope is there are some really important changes coming, whereby people struggling with their mortgages are going to have much more ability to get out of it without losing their home. And so what I'm calling for is a moratorium on any repossessions until those structures are in place, so people can have proper legal representation, proper financial advice, and they have much more power if they go into a courtroom or they negotiate with their bank. However, the government is resisting the call for a moratorium.
Stephen Donnelly from the Social Democrats, thanks very much indeed. Good morning to you. All right, 087 77 11 103. You like animals? You like animal funny stories and behavioural stories? Well, we've got the book for you with Colm Keane and Una O'Hagan in just a second.
The Morning Show on East Coast FM.
The Morning Show
with Declan Meehan.
Thanks to the Bridge Tavern, Wicklow Town, celebrating their all-new gastro bar menu.